Alaina and Neil from the Broad Street Review to being here. I'm really excited to talk to you all a bit more because I feel like something that many pals of mine talk about is like, what is the sort of place to go for arts and cover culturage in Philadelphia? And with the sort of loss of City Paper and the choices that Philadelphia Weekly has made, it really makes you all like ever more relevant, I think, and super exciting. So I guess I wanted to just start off for folks that are here and folks that might watch this later, asking a little bit. I think Neil, you're gonna jump in on this one. Like, what is Broad Street Review? How did it get started? Let's hear a little bit about its history.
Sure. A couple points that I can start with and then go into a little more detail. So Broad Street Review has been around since 2005. We've always been exclusively digital. That's something that I point out to people pretty regularly. Somebody will say, "Oh, I think I picked up a copy of that once." And I always say, "I don't think you've ever picked up a copy of Broad Street Review." But we've been a website focusing on arts and culture in the Philly region. So our founder is Dan Rottenberg, who has been in the Philly media scene broadly for decades now, more than 15 years for sure. And he conceived of BSR as this place that he and some of his friends and colleagues could write about these issues and ideas that they had that just didn't otherwise have homes in media outlets at the time. And so he started this website, and in a way it was brand new probably for a publication in 2005 to say we're only going to be digital and have a particular focus. There's some back history where University of the Arts helped get BSR off the ground.
Oh, cool.
But we've been an independent 501c3 for just about 15 years now. And we are still publishing arts and culture. With each talk a little bit more about what we've been doing under her tenure, but the core of it remains. And we have published across a number of channels, but a book section, a music section.
Sorry, Neil, I don't know if it's just me, but we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. It's going in and out. Do you mind just, oh, you're good.
It's maybe like just sounding scrambly.
Yeah, do you want to just perhaps back up like 15 seconds?
Yeah. Does this sound better? I switched microphones that I'm using.
Yeah, it does sound better.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So we define our pieces that we run in a number of different, we call them channels. So there's the books channel, the movies, film and TV channel, music, dance, theater, and so on. And so we like to cover a pretty broad range of topics. And our readers have, I believe, over the years learned that you can turn to BSR for theater reviews, but you can also turn to BSR if you want to find out what books are coming out that are by Philly authors, let's say. And very timely that Kyle V. Hiller has signed on to the call, because another key component of what we do is the What's New, What's Next section, which is previews for our activities. Yeah, I'll pause there, but we're chugging along in the year 2020, covering what's going on in new ways, and really excited to be connecting to groups like Blue Stoop that are in the area and have similar interests and audiences to us.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and I guess I should back up and say for anyone that I don't know, I'm Emma Eisenberg. I'm the director of Blue Stoop. We are sort of similar to Broad Street Review. We are on the internet. We do not live in a brick and mortar space as of yet, but are doing some, we do a lot of different programs. Usually we do an author event series as well as classes. Right now we're doing our craft classes as well as these Wednesday on the Stoop programming. So every Wednesday from 4 to 5, see some familiar names, which is awesome. And some people I don't know. So great. Thanks for that kind of overview of the history and the kind of, what you guys cover and all of that. And I guess, maybe I'll turn to Alaina and ask a little bit more about the sort of editorial vision of Broad Street Review, and in addition to what Neil shared, what are you all looking for? How does your editorial department work? Who writes for you? All that stuff.
Yeah, and yeah, so Kyle V. Hiller, who's joining us, he's our associate editor, and he's a great essayist, and we're just thrilled to partner. So like Neil was saying, BSR is an all online, Philly-centric, arts-centric journal. And we are on, I can say a little bit about just kind of our editorial schedule if you want. We publish weekly. We have a newsletter that goes out every Wednesday morning. Actually, one on Thursday mornings too. Kyle does one and I do one. Kyle's section of the site, like Neil was saying, is about previews, also like short profiles, like interesting artists around town, that kind of thing. We're always looking for folks to write that kind of stuff. And then we have a newsletter for the other section of the site, which is more essays, reviews, features, that goes out weekly. And one big thing to keep in mind too, if you're interested in writing for BSR, is that we're arts-centric, broadly defined. That could be essays about some, like a cultural issue that's close to your heart, or it could be a book review, or a theater review, or dance, or it's or movies, TV, especially now when everything's digital. So that's an important thing. Another thing that's important, like we're saying, is that we are Philly-centric, and that still can be broad. Like we can do things in the Philly suburbs, South Jersey, Wilmington, Delaware. But so when you're coming up with story ideas, really targeting that region, because we think Philly is worth that dedicated coverage for the art scene. And another really important piece of what we're doing on the editorial side and with all of our writers is that we want arts journalism that really represents and includes everyone in our city. So that means we work a lot to figure out how we can continue to diversify the field in terms of what's getting covered and also in terms of who the voices are. We want to make sure that it really is representative of Philadelphia. And that goes in so many different directions. It can be by age or income or race or gender, but also we're thinking about accessibility in terms of how do we make sure people with disabilities are welcome too, which is a huge issue on our art scene, like who physically can get into the space, who can access the content. So that's something that we're always targeting.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And I feel like, yeah, I just want to reflect back, I guess, that I just think that a lot of your work, many of them written by folks here, are just really my go-to in terms of figuring out how to think about things that are going on in Philadelphia. And I feel like that's more so than even, just concrete events of what's going on. I look to you guys, I think, to just, help me figure out when something happens, what do I want to think about it, which I think is the most exciting work of, all the writers that write for BSR, or what you can really provide to Philadelphia that I don't think anyone else is providing. I guess I would be curious, maybe just one more editorial question, which is like, in the sort of day in the life of Broad Street Review, I mean, what does it look like for you all to put together an issue? What kinds of things are you looking for more specifically when you open an email and say, do we want to, take this pitch from a writer or not? And how do you put together the kind of weekly, just the content that goes up to your readers?
And I can, and also we can get Kyle on this too. I would speak on two really important tracks for folks that are interested in writing. There's the sort of content, the sort of stories that we're looking for. And then there's info that you can know about how best to pitch BSR. So on just the content side, like what kind of stories we want to tell. Like Neil was saying, we have several different categories, including museums, music, theater, dance. We have a section called cross-cultural, which is a lot of really like interdisciplinary, diverse essays. We have a creative economy section, which has like features that are just reporting on that sort of like economic piece of our art scene. Like, how does it run? We're looking for features like that. Basically, we're looking to spotlight things that might have not gotten the attention on our local media scene. So if you do want to cover a major institution, can we spotlight maybe a new piece of programming they have that makes them more accessible or inclusive to a bigger audience or a new audience? Or is it a new company or a new initiative, something small that people don't know about, but that's doing cool work? Or is it work that has a really unique creative process? Or is it interdisciplinary in a way we haven't seen before? Does it have some kind of radical inclusion element? Maybe reaching out to folks that like haven't been represented or haven't been included before. Those are all the sort of stories that we really like to tell. I can say, because this is something I've been dealing with a lot in my inbox lately. If you're looking to write about the arts in the pandemic, I'm getting a lot of pitches that are like, and I want to say, what is the theater scene doing in a pandemic? Arts in the pandemic, what are they? And like, this is not, those stories aren't the scope of what BSR is trying to do all in one bite. We are telling the story of what's happening to our art scene in a pandemic. That is happening with every story that we write. So you want to see it kind of as like, if Philly is this giant mosaic of things happening, what's that piece that you want to tell? And tell me about that piece. So when you're making a pitch, you want to give me a little bit of context and background about whatever you want to say. You want to tell me why it's of interest to BSR's readers. That's really important, which means that you should be familiar with the site when we run. And it's also great if you can tell me why you are the person that should write this story. And that could be for a lot of reasons. It could be something to do with your identity, or it could be your experience or your interest, your expertise. But like, tell me why you should be on this story. So those are all things that make a successful pitch for us. And I can say this, and you can check out the site for an editorial that I published yesterday, which is also something that I'm seeing a lot of right now, which we can just all save our effort. BSR is not running commentary on our president at this moment. It's not that we don't think it's important or that we don't think it matters. Our mission is to spotlight all of the excellent things that are happening, a lot of them by people who are the most marginalized in this moment. We want to boost those voices. We don't want to give our oxygen to all of the madness in the federal government right now. So that is a thing that you can keep in mind when you're pitching too. And if there's, as far as our process, like kind of more of the nuts and bolts, we have what we call BSR Pitch Wednesday, which is just what it sounds like. That means if you want to pitch us a story, email Kyle or I, and we can say a little bit more later about what kinds of things should go to me and what should go to Kyle. You want a clear subject line. It says pitch, and then just a little bit about what it is. Send that anytime, but know that Wednesdays are when I'm looking at those. And it's a daytime event. Don't pitch me at 10:59 p.m. on Wednesday because I'm not at my desk then. And then our goal is to get back to you at some point on that weekly basis. And don't pitch by social media. You can avoid it. Like, you're totally welcome. Track me down on Instagram, Twitter. But if you have a pitch that you want to make or something that you think BSR ought to cover, shoot me an email. It's ajohns@broadstreetreview.com. It's all over our website. That's the best way to get a hold of me if you are trying. Like in my Twitter DMs or Instagram, like it's probably going to get lost. So
100%. Yeah, that stuff is really important.
Like a big jumble of stuff, and if there's something more specific, we can touch on it.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate that. And I think that I want to talk about money for a minute because I feel like we should talk about money more in the arts in general and also in writing. So do you guys pay, and how much do you pay?
Yeah, so we do pay. All of our writers are paid. Right now, the way our fees work is reviews are $50 each, and reviews usually run between 500 and 700 words. We're talking something pretty short and sweet. We pay $100 for stories that are longer, more in-depth, like essays or feature stories, and that would run between like 700 to 1,000-ish words. And those stories usually would involve an interview or two that you do. But although for that fee, I'm not expecting you to track down a whole bunch of interviews or write longer than 1,000 words. Broad Street Review is a nonprofit, and our budget is down to the wire every single month. And it is really important to us as a professional that we do pay all of our writers, and we're always working to raise those funds so that we could hopefully increase their fees in future. But that's how they are now. If you're working with Kyle, say you're doing a preview story or you're doing like a short profile, those are also $50. And yeah, if you have other questions, let me know.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
If I can hop in here for just at an organizational level, I don't have the numbers in my head, but it's on the order of 90% of our operating budget for a year goes to paying staff and writers.
That's awesome.
So it's one of the beauties of not having a printing press or a storefront. We want the people doing the work to get paid for doing that work.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I like knowing, and I think that's important, knowing how much of, if people want to donate to you or support your annual campaign, how much of that money goes to people doing the work. So that's wonderful.
A huge portion of it.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question, Kyle? Is that okay to put you on the spot?
That's totally okay.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm a huge fan of your work. I feel like your name is really like the flagship byline in a lot of ways that people come for. And and so I'm wondering, perhaps could you tell us a little bit more about the sections that you run, the preview section, what that is for folks that might not know?
Yeah, so I run the What's New, What's Next section in BSR. So essentially, on that column, we're going to do a lot of coverage as far as previews are concerned. So events that may be coming up on the weekend or early on in the week. And this year, though, we've made a little bit of a shift given the pandemic and everything, in doing more profiles of artists and organizations and things like that. When it comes to those profiles and everything, I like to lean into artists or events or organizations, groups that are, like Alaina said earlier, not going to have as much reach as maybe other people do. So if you're looking at something that's happening at like the Kimmel Center, that's maybe too big, something that I would want to suggest for us to cover. Sure, if it's interesting and if it has something to say that's different and unique, not that I'm dunking on Kimmel Center at all. It's one of those things where that's great, but I also want to feature the little people who may not be able to have things go on in larger venues, or they may not have the budget, or they may not have the access to the resources or the connections. And, you know, knowing Philadelphia and just how much of a scrappy little town we are, I think it's very important that we maintain that spirit and talk about that, because I think there are so many different people and artists who just wouldn't get the chance to be discovered. And I find that that's very important for our audience, because they want to know about those people, and that's who we are. And I feel like that's who we embody, is that we're, you know, the underdogs, we're the less spoken for, we are the marginalized. And I definitely want What's New, What's Next to thoroughly reflect that, especially when it comes to not just the previews, but also the profiles as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think that vision absolutely comes through for readers. Folks that have talked to me lately about work they've read, seems like it's much coming from people are saying, I found new artists or shows or things I wouldn't have known about. So, and
that's what's so excellent, is because that also means that I get to discover those things too. So when I'm, you know, accepting these articles and everything, it's a great moment for me, because there's so many things in the city that I have yet to discover and probably will never get to know, really, because if we aren't covering those things, then they'll never get known. And that's what I love about the city so much.
Absolutely. And I guess that brings me to, if you don't mind, like, how do you, for those folks that might be, you know, trying to do what you do to some degree, like, how do you find your subjects, or when you think about putting together a piece, like, are there a few questions, or is there a certain urgency that you're looking for, or how do you choose your topics?
Yeah, I think when it comes to trying to highlight smaller voices, I think so much of that does come to word of mouth. So you know, if you're going to be pitching profiles, it's good to kind of know what's going on and things like that, because those people aren't the ones that are getting the press releases in your email, you know. So digging those up and finding those people, if it's someone that has something going on that's coming soon, if they have a new album coming out, a new show, new performance, or something like that, a new book, that's definitely going to win bonus points in my eyes. I like to make sure that the profiles that we're running in What's New, What's Next are a little bit more evergreen, so we can kind of have that conversation and revisit it more often, rather, than the previews that are merely talking about what's coming this weekend or in the next few weeks. So I think that's also something to look out for. I like to make sure that if people are pitching things like that, that we sort of work on the pitch itself, because I do find that when I've had a couple of stories recently that I've run that I wanted to work with the writers and before they went on to tell the story, because I wanted to make sure that they understood that, hey, don't just profile this person, but understand why we should know about this person, what makes them unique, what makes them different, what makes them distinguished, and just like Alaina said earlier, what makes you the distinguished one in order to be able to cover this. And I think that has a lot to do with just being aware of what the conversation is around those things, those people. So I like to work with people before they go to write the story, saying, hey, you got this pitch. I think it could work, but we're not quite there yet. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Can we interview them on with these questions in mind? So that's something that I like to do when I'm handling pitches and things like that.
Excellent. Yeah, we're running a cultural criticism class right now for Blue Stoop, and I just got to drop into it, and people were talking about, so what makes a successful pitch. And there's so many kind of cookie cutter, sites out there that will tell you exactly what it looks like. But I think that was a much more helpful, articulate version of the core of what makes a good pitch.
It's about the why. I think we get so mechanical with our pitches that if you really care about something, you're really passionate about it, pitch it, because chances are that passion is going to come out in your pitch and what you have to say about it, and that's going to make it stand out. Whereas, you're just talking about something that, hey, this thing is happening on Friday, I want to cover it. And say, well, cool, but why? And I think that helps inform the writer of why they want to cover it in the first place. Because I know, just for me as a writer, sometimes I don't know that at first, and I have to figure that out. And that in itself is a conversation. So treat pitches as if they're conversations, but be passionate about it.
Absolutely. And I think it's really exciting that you and Alaina and folks are willing to take the time to do some editorial guidance or mentorship. I feel like I benefited from that at Philly Weekly when I was an intern there way back when as a tiny baby. And I think sometimes mentorship or the willingness to work back and forth in a conversation can be so hard. People are so busy. There's a million pitches out there to look through, but perhaps at this slightly more local scale, it's a bit more possible. So that's something I appreciate about you all too. Yeah, I have so many more.
Can I jump in?
Oh, go ahead.
And what you guys are saying is so important, and I want to emphasize that at BSR we do have like writers who are like veterans of the New York Times and other like major national publications, and we also have writers that are like getting literally their first byline. So we love working with writers that are really sharp and experienced and polished and have the skills, but also don't be afraid to come to us if you have that passion and that interest and you want to build, because it's particularly part of what we see of what's important to make sure everyone's welcomed in the field, to make sure that folks from all backgrounds are getting a shot to develop their skills. And that starts right out the gate when people are just starting out in the industry. And so it's something that it's work that Kyle and I are really excited to do. And we're like, we do like to work with folks to get them up to speed.
That's excellent. I really appreciate knowing that. Absolutely. Well, I was just going to say, there's so many things I could ask, but I wanted to just make space for folks that are in the room. If there are particular things that you would like to hear about from the kind folks at Broad Street Review, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or use the chat if that's easier. But are there any questions so far from folks who are joining us? Yeah, Siddhartha?
Hi, good evening. I'm delighted to find this group. I guess social media works. I saw you yesterday on the Authors Guild interview. I Googled your name and I discovered this, so here I am.
Awesome.
I was wondering, do you folks do the intersection of Philadelphia history and, say, German history? It's a rather arcane question, but I was wondering if you have any interest in that sort of thing, when the world came to Philadelphia, sort of thing.
Oh, you mean like a very long-term historical perspective?
Sort of. I was thinking specifically about 3 or 4 figures who are famous internationally, but one of them is probably more familiar. Most of us in the Philly area are familiar with him. He's Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German anti-Nazi martyr,
Mm.
executed 2 or 3 weeks before the Second World War came to an end, and who had relatives in Philadelphia, and who came to Philadelphia and spent 2 weeks here. And it was a formative experience for him. And I was wondering if that sort of thing might have any appeal for you or for your readership.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, yeah, I would say that's something we would love to hear about and develop. I would want to think carefully about when the best time to tell that story might be. Is there some kind of an event or anniversary or meaningful date that's connected to that that might be a good moment to plug that in. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing it, and definitely, like we were saying before, we take a really broad approach to arts and culture, and that can definitely mean cool historical perspectives that involve Philadelphia.
Oops, sorry, I think you're muted again, Siddhartha.
Great, thank you. That answers my question very well.
Great, we're glad you found us.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Maybe too, more broadly, like how much do you all look for that, it's happening moment? I mean, you said it's helpful to have some kind of a date or some kind of happening to staple things too, but do you also have any space to, I guess, for long form or stuff that may not be particularly related to the news cycle?
As far as long form, partly because of the way our budget is, I really don't want any of our writers pursuing something that would be hugely time consuming or very long. We just don't have the budget to pay you properly for that. And also with the way Kyle and I work, we also don't have the bandwidth to properly shepherd some stuff on a larger scale. But in terms of that sort of more evergreen kind of thing, I mean, if you are interested in stuff in that vein, you should look at or is anyone generally, check out the cross-cultural section of our website. Sometimes essays there have a specific peg, like maybe it's Pride Month or whatever, and we have an essay that's tied to some aspect of that. But especially now, in pandemic life, when the world has just been upside down and we don't have all of the normal events that we might be covering, there's been points where we've been able to be more open to evergreen stuff. And we definitely do welcome essay pitches that might have, you're exploring some aspect of your cultural identity or some aspect of history that you're interested in. So like Kyle was saying, we really are into to dig in and develop the stuff that you have. So feel free to bring it.
Cool, thank you. Thanks for the question.
If I could speak to something about the evergreen content, something that we take pride in at BSR is that all of our pieces that we've ever run are free and available to everybody. No paywall, no login. And so one of the things that's really enjoyable is finding those pieces that went up 5, 6, 10 years ago and still carry a lot of weight. They still are relevant today or have a renewed relevance sometimes. And those of us kind of on the team will revisit those and say, gosh, it's time to run that essay again. Promote it on social media, not run it as a brand new piece, to be clear. And that's delightful and fascinating to me as a reader and as somebody who has seen a lot of the content over the years myself. It's really quite staggering, but also very rewarding in terms of what we have built up as a BSR history.
Totally, and especially since you're saying everything is free, that seems it's a bit of a different vision for for a culture site than many others that exist. So that's very cool to know. Any other questions or areas of BSR that folks would be curious to hear more about? I think we have the founder in the room. Is that right, Dan? Hello.
Yeah, Dan Rottenberg is on.
I just unmuted myself.
Cool.
Here I am.
Welcome.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to say about the founding of BSR? Like, why did you think this was an important thing to exist in Philadelphia?
Well, I would say I've been involved over the years in a number of what I would call experiments in alternative journalism. And there was the Welcome Mat back in the 1980s. And then there was, well, Seven Arts magazine in the early 90s. And then there was the Philadelphia Forum, about 96 to 98. But I guess I always had this hunch that there was some kind of audience in Philadelphia that was interested in the arts and that wasn't really being served by the local mass media. And that's why when I started Seven Arts magazine, which was distributed to Channel 12, the members of Channel 12, I thought that was the audience. Well, I really wasn't. And that magazine didn't make it, but I always continued to have this vision, and I was trying to find some way to revive that magazine. And then I ran into Neil Kleinman of the University of the Arts, and he said, well, why don't you do it online? And I really didn't know anything about the internet. This is 2005, 15 years ago. But he persuaded me to try it. And of course, once I tried it, there's no going back to print because, you can post an article instantly and people can read it all over the world. You don't have to sacrifice any trees, or you don't have to worry about distribution problems. And the other thing is you want to write about a piece of music or a movie, people can hear the music while you're writing about it, or they can look at a scene from the movie. And the other thing is if you make a mistake, it used to drive me crazy when I was editing a weekly or monthly magazine. You would suffer for a week until you could correct the mistake. Well, now you have, you make a mistake, you fix it. So I became late in life a big believer in the internet. And I think, I guess, let's see, Alaina, I think you're the fourth editor we've had. I stepped down in 13, but each one of us, I think, has had a slightly different vision of what the site can be. But I think that all of us have this same sort of passionate interest in the arts and in Philadelphia as a community where we can use the arts as a tool to learn more about ourselves.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask, I think, how, and for anyone that's involved with the BSR, like how has the magazine changed over the years, from its founding to now? Have there been shifts in focus or shifts in values?
I can speak about that a little bit if you want, and I'm happy to have folks jump in. One shift that's definitely happened over the last several years, is particularly with Wendy Rosenfeld, who was the editor-in-chief before I was, is that we made a really specific choice that Broad Street Review is going to focus first and foremost on Philadelphia arts. If you go back on the site archives, you'll see that in the past, we like, for example, would run regularly theater reviews of shows opening in New York. But nowadays, we probably wouldn't do that unless there was some really strong connection to Philadelphia, like maybe a Philadelphia artist, or maybe a show premiered or was developed in Philadelphia, that kind of thing. Yeah, that focus on Philadelphia particularly is one way it's grown. And then the evolution that we're into now and have been in for the past couple of years since Kyle and Neil and I came on, is back to that idea of how do we advocate better accessibility in the field. And that's something that happens editorially. It's something that happens on a practical level. Like if you'll look at our pieces, we've made a standard practice of listing accessibility information with our reviews. Like, is there closed captioning? Is there audio description? Is there ASL? Are there sensory friendly events? It could be a wide range of things, but we always note that up front with the coverage because we think that information should be standard for any coverage, which is not something that you'll see generally, but it's really important to us. If you go to any of the articles we write, and we have a written image description on them because not all of the readers can see. So we want to make sure that all parts of the site are as accessible as possible, even if you're using a screen reader. And we're not experts on it. It's always a work in progress, but it's really important for us that we're working on it. So that's another important evolution for us. And Neil or Kyle, if you want to jump in, please.
Yeah, I'll just throw a couple sentences here, which is, I think part of what we've been trying to do with this accessibility information is normalize the use of it and open dialogues about it. We started approaching this, about 2 years ago now, and finding sort of a directory of arts and culture venues and producers in town and what they offer. It's not always clear from their own websites, and there's no, as I said, kind of directory like it. And so we want these places, theaters, museums, you name it, to be able to turn to us when they're sharing their information about an upcoming event or program, and state very plainly, like, oh, by the way, there's amplification available for people who are hard of hearing, or a number of causes. We're very lucky to have an intern earlier this year who,
we're just losing you a little bit again, Neil. No worries.
unmute.
Oh,
Is this better?
Yep, I think so.
Okay. Unknown technology issues. We had an intern earlier in 2020 who was collecting a lot of this information and trying to organize it in, I just keep calling it a clearinghouse. And so the last part, I said I was going to say only a few sentences, is that I would love these organizations to have access to it so that they know, oh, such and such is doing work, we could try to mirror that. And open up these sometimes literal doors to people a little more easily.
Gotcha. We did lose just the end of that, but what I think I heard you saying is talking about like making information about different venues and events more publicly available, accessibility information. That's fantastic. Yeah, I would love to. We do, it's not the same, but at Blue Stoop we have a site that's affiliated with us called Literary Philly. It's just literaryphilly.org. And we essentially, it's an open source calendar for all literary events going on in the city. So anyone can submit their event. And we also have resources and contact information for bookstores, MFA programs, writers groups, writers workshops, kind of everything is on there. And I would love to see the same for other arts. So it sounds like you all are doing that or working on doing it. Yeah, that's really exciting. Yeah, I was wondering about theater actually, because it seems like theater is a big part of the BSR's coverage. And I wondered, has theater always been a focus, or was that an effort to increase theater coverage at some point?
I think right now we're kind of, like theater has always been a big part of BSR. It's always been, like for example, we're usually our most visited channel. People are really into the theater reviews, and it's been a huge part of the site. And in recent years, we've been working to build up other aspects of our coverage and diversify them within each field. Like BSR also used to cover a lot of classical music, for instance, that like almost all the music coverage would have been classical music concerts. But over the past year or two, we've really been mixing that up and doing more, like you could see stuff that's about like folk music or punk music or like rap and R&B or like all kinds of different events. So in theater and on all our channels, we're just looking to expand beyond what traditionally we had covered. But yeah, theater is big for us, and that's one reason the pandemic has been really difficult because we had, all of a sudden there was no theater events, and that's the majority of what our visitors are coming to the site to see. So we had to pivot. And
also there's been such necessary difficult conversations happening in the theater community about racial justice, I know,
Yes.
and you all have done some good coverage of that, but I'm curious to see what, you know, how the theater world will rebuild itself. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Well, Dan, you mentioned community before too, thinking about the ways that BSR can create a kind of arts community in Philadelphia. And that's something that obviously I'm very passionate about too, since Blue Stoop is a community writers organization. So I guess I was curious, like, how does BSR create community, or how do you all see yourselves as part of a kind of broader arts community?
Gee, to me, the community is what it's all about, and you are creating a new community. We have had several. I mean, when I started Broad Street Review, the idea was we're just going to get a bunch of bright people together and let them talk about whatever they want, and they could be all over the world. And basically, I'm going to had a very selfish goal, which was to educate myself and learn a little more about the arts. But I mean, we had one writer who had heart surgery. He wrote a 6 or 8 part series about what he went through. We had another guy who wanted to write very erudite pieces about basketball, and you know, my feeling was, okay, this is, you know, whatever. If this is somebody I think's a good writer, I'm going to let him or her come along and do whatever they want. Subsequently, I mean, Judy Waitman, who succeeded me, said, let's narrow the focus to Philadelphia. And Wendy Rosenfield, who succeeded her as editor, said, really, you know, the Philadelphia cultural scene is underappreciated, and there's so much great stuff going on here, and we should stop talking about New York, because there's really wonderful stuff going on here. And part of the reason is because a lot of creative people are leaving New York and coming to Philadelphia now, because the overhead, the cost of living is so much less. You can start a dance group or a theater group here and still support yourself and make a living in Philadelphia. I have writer friends in New York who say, I'm moving to Philadelphia. And I say, why? And they say, because I can't support myself in New York, and I can do the same work in Philadelphia. And if I have to go to New York, I just get on the train. Of course, that was all before the pandemic. But whatever it is, we have a lot of strengths in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And I think, I mean, it's taken, what, Broad Street Review's been around for 15 years. We have created, I think, a following, and it grows and it evolves, and that's the nature of a living organism, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd love to speak about another kind of angle on the community aspect, which is connecting our writers with each other has been something that, so I've been involved with BSR in some way for about 5-6 years now. And it's been really interesting to see people who otherwise are merely reading each other's work online come together in one space and say, oh gosh, like I remember the first time I met Margaret Darby, who's on this call, I had just read something by you like 3 days before, and I was so tickled to see you in person. And I thought, great, that's the strength of these in-person connections. And we were, you know, running those periodically before 2020 did its 2020 thing. But truly, the writers, because it's a group of people who are on a somewhat ad hoc basis to an extent, people have other activities and lives within the Philly world. And so there's a lot more crossover between, say, someone writing about theater and people creating theater now through BSR. So it's one aspect. And the other part is because we have such dedicated readers across a number of fields and industries, and we have that arts and culture focus. The name BSR, I hesitate to say it brings cachet with it, but people light up a little differently than if you mention like a mainstream outlet. Oh, I do some work with BSR, and they say, oh, I love reading your newsletters. And that, I had a phone call yesterday from a local artist where he said, you know, every time I get an email from BSR, I open it and I love to know what's going on. And that's
it's very meaningful to us that we're not just connecting the people who are consuming the arts, but also the people who are creating it.
I think that's really meaningful. And we did, partner with you all for one happy hour for writers that write, for BSR or for other arts and culture outlets in the city, which was super joyful and fun. And I think we're not trying to create a substitute for those by having these Wednesdays on the Stoop, but I think the more we try to approximate like what could have been, the sadder it is, but the more we lean into what's now possible that wouldn't have been possible before, Wednesday at 4:00 to see all of you would not have been possible before necessarily. So we're trying to create other ways to spotlight the work that you do and that and to bring writers across, the city together too as part of Blue Stoop's mission. But yeah, I opened Broad Street Review emails right away, West Philly local, and that's about it.
I think to kind of go back to what we were just saying about the fact that we wouldn't be meeting here had we not had this, I think that is a testament to our dedication to accessibility, because not everyone is able to, whether it be a disability or whether it be that they're just working. There's so many things that are, there's so much creativity to be had because of this limitation. And I think that's so important. And to circle back to what we were saying earlier about just community, I think everyone's in this together. And I think that is such a big thing in Philly that you can't underestimate, because even though it seems like we're all connected in this way, it almost seems like it's taboo as if that's the way it's supposed to be, and it's not. And the fact that everyone is celebrating each other, I think is so remarkable. I jumped in a call and was told that I've got a flagship name, and that's just crazy to me. But it's also one of those things. It's like, I'm a fan of yours too, and it's just that's that whole Spider-Man theme where it's like, I like you, and that's kind of what we do. So it's really important.
No, it isn't, and I think I'm excited to hear that. I can see the value in a broader umbrella, but I think having a specifically Philadelphia-based arts and culture it's so key. Like without that, who are we? And I do think that this continuous focus on the interrelationship, or who's a part of whom, the New York Philadelphia sort of interrelationship doesn't really serve anybody. So I really appreciate that specific local coverage, but that is, again, like you said, also extremely multi-layered and varied, and different parts of the city, different communities are represented. So such a joy. What haven't we talked about? Or are there other folks that are here? I know, Margaret, you write for the Broad Street Review, or if other folks have aspects of the paper.
I wanted to say that I think Alaina, Kyle, and Neil have opened the door to a lot of new people. They have encouraged people to kill sacred cows if necessary. I feel like there was very, we love our classical music, and I love classical music too. But on Broad Street, I feel that people have had the courage to say, just because you're writing 20th century music doesn't mean we have to revere it, or they're open to ideas outside the box. And that has been a wonderful experience for me, because it gives me courage too.
That's wonderful.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Is the community stuff too? Is there anything that we as your community, or folks that are here that are considering writing for the publication, or perhaps readers of the publication, like how can we support you, I suppose? How can Philadelphia support Broad Street Review besides giving you all our money?
Yeah, I could say a couple things. Yeah, we're funded by our a big chunk of our budget just comes from donations each year. And even if you have just like $5 or $10 to throw, like that matters. If you want to, as a writer, if you want to join our writers community, shoot me an email and I'll get you signed up on our writers newsletter list. It goes out like, let's say maybe a couple times a month. It's not a specific date, but it's kind of a roundup from Kyle and I of stories that are available for coverage that we want someone to take on, or just community updates, what's up with BSR and what's up with us. I think this has been a really important thing during the pandemic too, because our team, we're leaders of this community at BSR, and like our readers are looking to us, our writers are looking to us. And so we need to be really, really mindful of what we're covering and how we're making sure that our writers are safe. So that's, you know, in that sort of bigger lens of community, that's something that is really tricky to navigate that we're just doing all the time now. Yeah, so shoot me an email. We can, if you're interested in writing, we can get you, even if you don't have an assignment yet, you can get on that list and kind of get in the groove of seeing what we have to say and what we're interested in seeing. And check out our social media. Every Wednesday we have what we call BSR Love Wednesday. That's the hashtag. And every week we have an editor's pick that we share from the new stuff on the site that week, but anyone can share it. So read the site. If you see a piece that really speaks to you, share it under that BSR Love Wednesday hashtag on Wednesday. And that's part of a conversation that we want to generate in our community. And kind of back to what Neil was saying about how we support each other in our community, show some love for the other writers and artists in your community. How can you boost them in a regular way?
Yeah, I'll share 2 points here. I think on very different levels. Following like the Love Wednesday ideas, as a reader, stretch your mind for a few minutes. Like it's not going to be a large investment of time probably. If you're something you normally reads, just start reading a section, go check out something cross-cultural or personal. No,
Sorry, Neil. Yeah, once more.
How about now? Better?
Seems a bit better.
I
Yeah.
don't know what's happening. But yeah, read outside your normal channels on the site. And then going back to Alaina's original point is we have a group called Friends of Bsr, which is people who donate above a certain level or have a recurring donation to us. And we appreciate those friends a great deal.
Great. How do we become a friend of BSR?
You can go to the donate page on our site, which I'll drop in the chat box. And if you donate at least $5 a month or $60 one time in a year, you'll get access a couple times a year to special events and so on.
Cool. And you count as a friend. How exciting. Delightful. I feel like it's always hard to get people in the arts to pitch themselves and ask for money, so we try to help you out. That's fantastic. Okay. I feel that has been a beautiful conversation. We've covered a lot about the history and about what you all do and what makes it special. I think the only maybe question I have left is, I think Kyle and Alaina, you talked about from the editorial side, you handle different things. If people want to send pitches, who should they send them to? What different content areas do you all have?
Sure. Yeah, that's an important thing. So if you want to write a feature story that's exploring, taking a somewhat in-depth look, say, at a company that's doing something interesting, or you want to comment on some aspect of the economics on our art scene, that's a story that goes to me. If you want to write a review, you want to review a show or a concert or a book, that's to me. If you have an essay that you want to pitch, that's to me. If you want to write a preview of something, like a specific event that's coming up and you want to do a write-up of why it's cool and why people should go to that event, that's Kyle. Or if you want to do like an artist spotlight type thing, like a short profile, that's also a Kyle. And if you don't need to include us both on the pitches, if you can identify which it is and then send it to him or send it to me. And I'll put our emails in the chat box so you guys can all see.
Awesome. Thank you. Perfect. Well, this has been such a delight, and I feel like I'll just continue, being a booster for BSR around the land of Philadelphia. But yeah, it was nice to see some faces of folks. I hope you consider writing for BSR, spread the word, and thanks so much to Alaina and Neil and Kyle and also Dan for dropping in, and Margaret, and it's good to see you all. So yeah, we have Alaina's email there in the chat, and I'll just leave that up for a couple more minutes if anyone wants to hang out, but thanks so much. We'll be back next Wednesday, as we are here every Wednesday at 4. We have some exciting classes coming up for Blue Stoop too, and we're gonna have a really fun December fundraiser. So if you're not on Blue Stoop's newsletter, you can sign up at bluestoop.org. All right, thank you all.
Thank you. It's a great conversation.
Yeah, super
Yeah,
fun.
thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
Okay,
Awesome. Thank you all.
great. All right, talk to y'all soon.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.